Hi guys, my name is Charles Chicalo, and this is what I'm calling, for now at least, the marketplace of ideas, where I take current events, books, movies, or even things I hear about, and we analyze them from an independent perspective. So much of today's world is just listening to a talking head on either side of your ideology and just simply believing it, not questioning or evaluating its source. Not here. Here, I present you with facts. I present you with an independent take that is a result of my own thinking. I invite disagreement. I love dialogue. And something I love more than both of those, alternative perspectives, especially those that oppose me. Where we learn the most are from the people and viewpoints that disagree with ours. We don't have to come to their side, but we definitely have to learn from their side. With that, here's our episode for this week. You're a critical thinker. And what you're seeing in this younger generation is a lot less attention span, a lot more of we need something mentally triggering. We need something that's stimulating, quick, and short. In this episode, you'll find something that I think is maybe a remedy to that. Our younger generation, that's attention spans that have been ever shortened, could be remedied by an exposure to a liberal arts education, something that is a 2 week summer program in an episode that's not your typical marketplace of ideas podcast. You may find something that, if you have a young one at home or know somebody of high school age, this is a program I don't mind promoting because it gets you philosophically inclined, it gets you critically thinking. And to be honest, I love philosophy. More of it is more popular ideas, more engagement with the other side, how to construct logical arguments and exposure to things you may not agree with. That's right up our alley. So, for those of you interested in hearing about what the Reason and Rationality Bootcamp is at Princeton and Swarthmore University this summer, take a look at my message and conversation with Peter. And I'm with Peter Bach-y-Rita. Peter, introduce yourself. What do you need the audience to know about you before we go into a conversation about reason and rationality?
Well, Charles, I am a attorney. That's my trade, but I studied undergraduate at Princeton. I studied philosophy, and then I went and got a PhD in philosophy at MIT. And so philosophy has always been part of me. And I came back to it later in life. I was practicing as an attorney, and I had a friend, and he said, "Hey, you should give a little philosophy seminar to some students that we have at a local San Francisco private school." And I was 20 years separated or 15 years separated from my philosophy world, and I had to come up with a course, and it was very successful. And so I'm here because the course is growing, and we're turning it into a summer program that's residential in Princeton, where I studied, and at Swarthmore. And we're going to bring in graduate students in philosophy that are just super high IQ, but they're really charismatic, really fun, and lovely young people. And they're going to be the instructors, and we're going to talk about the biggest ideas in philosophy.
So, I mean, all of this is right up my alley. I was a political philosophy major, and I had minors in religion, Middle East studies, and I loved everything of what you just said. The trends recently, though, have been very much in the hard sciences.
Yeah,
Have you seen a decline in interest because of the hard science, I guess, popularity?
sure. Well, I'm just starting this, so maybe I should have been more careful and not gotten into philosophy at this time. But no, in uh, in honesty, the backlash is already underway. There are already a lot of parents and students that are worried that with AI, knowledge is becoming cheaper. But wasn't just the AI. People have always, in recent history, been aware of the importance of critical thinking. And there's a flow, there's a back and forth in what students major in economics and then into computer science, and it goes back and forth. But philosophy has always had a little bit of an audience. Philosophy departments have held steady, even while a lot of the other humanities have gotten slammed in as far
Yeah.
as who's attending those majors. The philosophy departments have never done that badly.
So I remember I mean, the philosophy department was, not exactly where I thought I would end up in undergrad.
Yeah,
And I just said to myself, I'm not going to be another political science guy that goes into law school. I didn't go into law school, but that's a story for another time.
right.
When, but you hit an interesting point. At the times that we're at, the AI revolution, let's call it, the value is coming out that you don't need the hard sciences as much because all you need to do is have control of the AI. The AI is something that's very logically based.
Hmm.
And as long as you have the concepts of how to maneuver around AI, you can use that to your advantage. AI is very much, is almost, I would say, entirely based in logic. It's very much based on instruction, probability, and statistics. All things that I think philosophy grounds itself in. Uh, it's been a while since I did a syllogism, but I think, but I
Well,
think,
attend our course and we'll teach you.
right. I
We'll
mean,
teach you
it's
about
been
it.
a while since that, and I'm pretty sure that the ethics of even using AI would be covered as well.
Sure.
Interestingly enough, this reminds me of a book that I read while I was in college. Fareed Zakaria wrote a book in defense of a liberal education, where he hits this exact point. Um, he goes into how the same point I opened up with. More people were focusing on hard sciences because that's sort of the future. You should know how to computer code. You should know how the meritocracy is going to take over, and that the better you are in the hard sciences, the more successful you'll be in this world. AI has turned that on its head. This backlash that you mentioned about reason and rationality, is that not aided by the same mentality I opened this up with? I mean, people should be more inclined towards a liberal education, especially as a result of the AI revolution over the past year and a half.
Sure, people need to be generalists. They need to be able to take in a lot of information and sort that information and prioritize it and break it down into the constituent parts and problem solve. And the people that are going to be successful under AI are probably the same people who have always been successful in every economic revolution. They're the people who network well, talk well, think well, take in a lot of information, figure out what the next thing is, convince other people that that's the next thing, and that they and to support them. So those skills of reasoning and presenting yourself and conversing and all the things that go into being a person who presents himself or herself as a compelling rational thinker. Well, those skills are more valuable now than they ever have been, and they're especially valuable when there's growth and change in an economy like there is now.
So you hit something on the information they take in and how they present themselves.
Yeah,
The A lot of what we do here is about the information diets of people, and in a hyperpolarized age where people are very ideologically fixed, they're really in an echo chamber and don't really want to break out of a bubble or an information bubble that they're comfortable in.
right.
How does the information diet of a certain thinker impact reason and rationality in two spheres?
Okay.
First, in the sphere that you'll be teaching, and second, how has it impacted things in the professional field, such as your legal practice and other business endeavors throughout your life?
Right. You know, we are reason rationality is sort of a curation exercise, right? So we started by thinking, what are the most important philosophical concepts that a young person should be exposed to that they might not have gotten otherwise? So much information out there. There's so many different subjects competing for people's attention. And it was shocking to me that smart people that I respect, that I admire, smart instructors, they hadn't stepped back and they thought, okay, we're not starting pedagogy from the beginning. We're not scrapping all the school, but we're just thinking, okay, now in this time, in this year, what are some of the most important ideas that we should teach to a high school person that they're probably not going to learn otherwise?
Right.
And for me, of course, this is reason and rationality. This is a philosophy course, roughly. And so these are going to be a priori they're ideas. They're not going to be empirical ideas. They're not scientific ideas. Or many scientific ideas are very important. Many actually a lot of the most important scientific ideas actually are going to get taught to a student in high school. They're going to probably hear about evolution, for example, or global warming or other things like this. A
All
lot
right.
of the philosophical and abstract ideas aren't going to reach those students, and so I started to drop a list, and I realized, oh my gosh, hardly any of these are getting taught. A lot of the ideas are economics, which is
How
fundamentally
so?
a
I mean,
priori.
I'm thinking to Philo 101. I mean, I'm
Yeah.
thinking about the mind body problem. I'm thinking about,
Hmm.
is there a God? I'm thinking about good and evil. How is it economical?
Stu, okay, so those are ideas that God, we're not talking about, not
I
part of the curriculum,
understand.
right? For
I
obvious
understand.
reasons, right? Um, mind body problem, absolutely. A lot of our instructors have lots of thoughts, very thoughtful people who can talk about God with with the high school people who were hoping to enroll in the program. They can do that after class and between class. During class,
Hmm.
if the
Hmm.
students want to bring it up, just not part of the curriculum. So these are all things that aren't taught in high school. Many or most young people will get through college without thinking about these things. So our idea was we're going to hit these things. But to your question about economics, when I started to sit back and think, okay, what are a priori ideas? So economics, obviously, it's a science, right? But
Sure.
but all the econ that you're going to learn in your intro micro course, the only um, the only empirical assumption that it requires is that everybody's a self-interested actor who's going to behave rationally to maximize the amount of stuff that they get. That's the only empirics
Hmm.
that you need for your intro micro course, and the rest is just kind of math that follows from that. So I started to think, okay, well, if I only have a few hours with these young people, what
Sure.
are the major things that they need to know? And I thought to myself, well, how about supply and demand curve? That's so important. I mean, you can't you can't think about so many of the big social issues, the big things that come up in the news, if you have no sense of economics of incentives or response to incentives
So
or
then, are you
supply and
the
demand.
realm of philosophy into economics?
Well, I'm not. So there's would be a field called the philosophy of economics,
Right.
right? And I'm not that well acquainted with that field, but if it's like the philosophy of other
Sure.
fields, then they might, philosophize about uh, the central concepts of economics or
And
analyzing those
is your
concepts.
general strategy
That's
just to
not what we're
expose
doing.
them to specific ways of thinking, different philosophers, different works, or
No, we're not.
is it applying it to the modern day?
Well, there might be examples from the modern day. The main thing that we're going to be doing is just acquainting students with these tools, with these concepts. So let me give you an example. Uh, the unit on supply and demand that when I've taught it in the past, what we did was we really marinate in the supply and the demand curve. So if you go into an econ 101 class in college, they'll draw those lines up on the board and they'll start talking about the equilibrium and all that. And that's great. That's fine. When you're in college, there's a lot
Sure.
to get through. It's a lot of material, and you don't have to dwell too long. Okay, what we will do is we'll sit down and really talk through with the students. Okay, suppose there was a bake sale in your school, and suppose that you could get $40 per cookie. How many cookies would you bring to market? Now, the, the first answer that might occur to you is I'd bring an infinite number of cookies to market, right?
Of course.
Billions and billions of cookies, because you're a business person. If you're getting $40 a cookie, you're essentially minting money, right?
Yeah.
So if you could sell all those cookies, you would want to do that. You would put as practically as much effort and capital into doing that as possible because you could become a billionaire overnight if you were able to
Hmm.
sell all the cookies, if
Yep.
there was the demand for those cookies. But in fact, there are practical constraints that you would be under,
Sure.
right? I mean, it's your mom's kitchen, right?
Right.
How are you going to get another? Okay, so it's actually you could actually have a conversation
All right.
with a 13, 14-year-old person about this. These are the real world constraints that they're under, and talk through. what you're doing is you're talking through the supply curve with them, and they can see why it's a curve, because in the short term there are constraints that you're under, so that even if you could get $40 a cookie, you can't deliver all the cookies you want to the market. And so once you can work down that curve, and you can see how many cookies they could and they'd be willing to bring to market at every price point. And then you talk about the demand curve for a bake sale in their school, and you do this with teenagers, and it turns out, that their cookies are $3 or so.
Right.
It turns
Right.
out every
Okay.
time
So,
the cookies are
so listen,
$3.
listen. You're talking to a philosophy guy. I love this
Yeah,
stuff. I'm what the general stereotype is when you're hitting high schoolers and proposing that they engage in this kind of boot camp, let's call it. How does that trigger them in a good way
sure.
of what people are calling the TikTok generation? I mean, these people are used to short, stimulating bits.
Hmm.
This requires meditation, maybe a little bit of digestion of certain ideas and applications that I would think they're not just used to. So how do
Yeah,
you
sure.
attract them?
So this conversation with your if you're there with teenagers talking about supply and demand in this way, it's actually brought down into their lives in a way that you can actually have a pretty humorous conversation about it.
All right.
And so that actually becomes more fun for them. So it does become a bit difficult to keep a student's attention when you're too into the text, which most often the student hasn't even read,
Right.
right? So a typical philosophy class is very into the text, and
Yes.
that's what college is about. That's what high school is about. It's about preparing you to really engage very rigorously, tightly with the text, and understand every sentence and understand the argument, pick it apart, and then be able to respond to it with your own scholarship, with your own writing. So it's intense reading, intense writing. We have a very different approach in this program. It's a summer program, and it's about having a conversation. It's about having a good time. And in order to do that with young people, what you're doing is you're finding a sweet spot. I kind of analogize it to the flow. You've probably heard about the flow, when
No.
people are working. Have you heard about flow state? So, so people who talk about productivity,
Yeah.
they'll say, if you want to get into that state, it's kind of a blissful state where you're highly productive, you feel good, you're getting a lot done, you're not bored, but you're not overtaxed either. It's this perfect place in between, where if the tasks you were doing were more intense or more difficult, you burn out and you have to take a break. If it was less intense, less engaging, you'd be bored.
Sure.
So you define that perfect spot. So with a group of 13-year-olds, 14-year-olds, 15-year-olds talking about economics, if you're up there on the whiteboard just graphs and this is the shaded area underneath and blah
Right.
blah 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 blah, that's interesting for a lot of students. It was interesting for me. It's probably interesting for you, and it can hold my attention for a little while, but it's taxing.
Sure.
Okay, we're doing something that is equally valuable, more valuable for this student at this time of their life, which is to maybe ratchet back some of the intensity and have a conversation about it. More like you were having beers with a
You
friend.
you you hit on a nerve that is really close to me. Right. I mean, before our eyes, I believe we're living in a world where truth continues to, I guess, disappear. People doubt that there is a truth, one central truth, and people are the information they take in is really based off of opinion,
Mhm.
hyperbole, and conjecture that, I mean, is not a truth, especially in the philosophical realm. A truth is something that is repeatably true, demonstrably true. And if we're going back to the scientific method, something that is that there's a hypothesis, repeated verification. Now, are you gonna be implementing some sort of test system as to what the truth is, if there's a truth, nihilism, stoicism, anything like that, as to
Right.
what kind of information to take in, what to believe, how to believe it?
we're not going to do that. We're not. We don't want to be political. And
And
if you start,
nor would I say too.
sure.
I mean, I would say what I would say is, I guess, establish what truth is in the
Mm.
philosophical realm. I think that's a central tenet. No.
Oh, certainly, yes. So, um, let me put it this way: we're hoping to give students confidence and tools to assess when they're reading good arguments, when
Hmm.
they're engaging with a thoughtful conversation with we don't want to. We're certainly not going to point them in the direction of, well, this is a this source of information or news out here. This is a good source. I mean, this is the sort of thing. It won't be part of the curriculum. Maybe it'll come up in conversation. Maybe
Hmm.
afterwards, one of the students will say, "Hey, Peter, what are some of your favorite blogs?"
Yep.
Happy to
Yep.
share that with them. But we're trying to be more politically neutrally, give people tools to assess. Now, when our students walk out and they've gone through a kind of a rationality boot camp, I think that they'll be in a better position. And this is honestly, I think, one of the ways that people decide what sources to
Yeah.
rely on. I think what you do is people look for bits and pieces in the source, and they think to themselves, okay, is this being honestly presented? I'm able to assess at least the small part, right?
Gotcha.
So you got to be careful. You got to be honest these days, because people are gonna scrutinize, say, look, that argument there, that was a dishonest argument. So I don't know if I can trust anything else that this person says. And so that is one tool that we're hoping that these students can walk away with, that they are able to open up a newspaper and say, okay, I read this. I can't I can't assess most of the facts that are presented in this. I'm just not in a position to do that. But I'm able to assess this. And this is honestly presented, or this is not honestly presented.
Right.
That's a tool. That's a tool we can help students
So
with.
what I'm thinking is the biggest charge I hear nowadays. I mean, my audience knows that I believe in read it all, have the biggest media diet you can, and
Hmm.
extrapolate whatever arguments you'd like. The answer and truth lies somewhere in the middle. Usually, it's the Aristotelian golden mean, if you want to call it that.
Yeah.
And when you read it all and have that expansive kind of view, it opens you up to finding different perspectives that is not privy to everybody who finds themselves in an echo chamber. When you have two sides arguing at each other, the biggest charge is you are unreasonable. And then you stop reasoning and engaging with the other side. Being that you reason and rationality, the charge of being unreasonable. I mean, irrational, I know has a logical definition. Unreasonable, what is the threshold for being unreasonable?
Oh my. I've never thought about what the threshold would be called
Irrational has a
reason and
very
rationality.
logical
That's right.
textbook definition. That much I
That's
know.
right. That's right. That's true. That's an important subtle distinction between those two things.
Yeah.
And unreasonableness. That seems to be a bit more fuzzy, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It seems
Yeah.
to
And I
to
mean,
live somewhere in.
there's the Bentham kind of argument that you engage with everybody. There's the Mills
Uh-huh.
argument of the same magnitude. And that line is not delineated. It's not
Hmm.
delineated, especially in today's day and age. So I don't know. What's the
Well,
reason that you're
gosh,
going to
it's
be
so hard
teaching?
because it seems like something that is ineffable. That's intangible. That can't be defined, right?
Yeah.
Because being reasonable person is a little bit like being wise. It seems like it's an art, in that the wise person or the reasonable person will have all these different tools, reasoning tools, models. Will have different models of how society works, how the world works. And what really makes you wise is a kind of a sense for which one you need to take off the shelf and use at any given point in time, right? So if we're back in COVID, COVID is just emerging.
Right.
There are all these different kinds of tools you can use to assess it. Now, one tool you might use is, well, there was this bird flu, and there was this swine thing, and there was a SARS, and it never amounts to anything. Right?
Yeah.
That was one model you could have used. honestly, I was pretty inclined towards that model. That was a mistake. That was not wise. That was not wise. But there are other
Right.
models you could use too. Like if you
So
were so to wrap up, wisdom,
yeah.
some large part of wisdom is knowing which of the tools. If you had been the one who took down off the shelf a kind of epidemiologist's understanding of exponential growth and the other things that were going on there, and if you had a sense, that's the tool. That's really the tool that I need here. That's wisdom, and so being reasonable is it's not as being reasonable is on the way to being wise, right?
Okay.
So if somebody
So
is
here's
reasonable,
my
he at
approach
least
to
has
it.
some sense of which tools to use in which context.
So here's my approach to it. Being reasonable
Yeah,
means being well acquainted enough with a variety of sources, just as
there you go.
or with an overlap enough with the person sitting next to you. How is that for
I
reason?
I will endorse that because in order to be reasonable, you have to have enough of an acquaintance with the array of perspectives and ways of approaching a problem, tools for solving a problem, that you could sit back dispassionately and you can have a sense for which of those have the most merit. And you can weigh them and you can say, "Oh, okay, I've taken it all in, and this is how I think go forward."
Okay. So talk to me a little more about yourself. And you started out in the philosophical realm. You went to in your legal profession. How'd you use your philosophical, I guess, inclinations? Did you? You said you haven't engaged in Did you use any philosophical you learned in your legal practice? If so,
Sure.
how?
I would say that law, like philosophy, so many other areas,
Well,
it
this conversation may
involves
benefit
you
from
take
this
something.
question. What kind of law?
Yeah. Oh, well, so right now I do class action law, and actually I'll tell you about a particular class action that I've been working on and how philosophy had a very
Sure.
identifiable uh, benefit in this
All
particular
right.
case. It's a great story. But in law, you're taking big morass of facts and laws, right? Somebody comes to you and they start rattling off all the things that happened, and your job is to try to listen to all of that and discard the stuff that
You
isn't
sift through
important.
it. Yeah.
Sift through it, distill it, so you kind of get
Yeah.
the essence of, and then you
Facts of the
and
case or a
what they teach you in law
statement,
school.
put in a complaint. Yeah.
Exactly. You have to take those facts and you have to align them with some sort of a statute or a law or something so that the facts line up
Hmm.
with the claim, and
Yep.
so that kind of distillation, getting things down to the essence, that's what actually you're doing in a philosophy class. I think a lot of people don't have a sense for what goes on in an academic philosophy department at a respectable research institution in this country. But that's essentially what you're doing in a philosophy class, and you're doing it, especially say in like an intro ethics class. So if you take an intro ethics class and they have some question like the ethics of abortion. Is it ethical to abort a 2-month fetus? And what you're going to do in that class is you're going
Don't
to
tell me you're going to
contend
go
with
and
arguments
fill
and
up a
try
foot
to.
and what do you call it? The abortion argument if you
Yeah,
wake up to
that's
an
what you're going to
orchestra
do.
or something like that.
Yeah, that's what you're going to do. You're
All
going to
right.
try to
All right.
distill out the essence of an argument that it's right or it's not right, and you're going to and it's best you'll put it into a premise and conclusion form to make
Hmm.
it as clear uh, and graspable as possible. So that's what students will do in an intro philosophy course, and that's what we're some of what we're doing in a way in reasonable rationality, and that certainly helps you doing the law. Like
So
that's what the
are you
law
gonna
is about.
so tell me this, are you gonna set up basically two contrarian arguments? One, let's say, of Like the Cartesian argument of I know, therefore I am, but basically everything is maybe a trick
Right.
versus a very creationist argument. I'm trying to think who might that be. That would be probably Aristotle. Everything has a
Yeah.
central matter point. Um, are, as long as there's as there are two extremes and maybe some arguments in the middle, is that the way you're going to be setting up the course, or is it just highlighting different areas of philosophy that could apply
Mhm.
practically?
So let me tell you how we deal with that kind of Cartesian. So you have a room of teenagers who haven't
Hmm.
studied philosophy before.
Right.
It has value to present them with the awe and the wonder and the mystery of that Descartes urged us to appreciate, right? Of course, many or most of those students have actually already thought about the Cartesian dilemma,
I'm
right?
sure.
You know, I mean, it's in popular culture now, right? It's difficult to have much of a classroom conversation that makes progress, right? It's difficult to have much to say about it. As you know, in philosophy, it's kind of like World War One trench warfare. It
Yeah.
takes, it takes a lot of research, and
To
papers and
gain just a few inches.
gain just a few inches, and maybe you lost a few inches,
Right.
and it's not the most beneficial thing for the students to drag them through that kind of frustration. It is valuable for them to appreciate the wonder. So how are you going to present? So you want to make this part of your curriculum. What are you going to do? I'll give you an example of what I do. Okay, one thing that I want the students to walk away learning is a concrete piece of real information they can use for the rest of their life, and that smart people, it's good for them to be acquainted with. It's Bayes' rule, right? It's a formula that's used. People hear, Nate Silver talking about Bayesian updating.
Yep.
Well, might as well learn what the formula, learn the rule. Here's the rule. We go through the rule. We plug and chug. We just use the rule over and over again. And then what I do is I have the students. I field from them their own prior probabilities about, say, if this world were a simulation, what's the probability that you would be like president of the United States or something, or who's the singer who's going to be singing at the Super Bowl,
Hmm.
uh, of some celebrity. You'd have some great job.
Being that the day we're recording this, the Super Bowl's in a few hours.
Exactly. Um, and you get that you feel that prior from the students, and usually it's like, oh, it's like 1 in 100 or 1 in 1,000 that I'd have some awesome job, because
Right.
if this were a simulation, it's not like a sure thing that I would be given an awesome job. Maybe the point of the simulation is to humble me.
Right.
Maybe, you
Right.
know
Right.
but there'd be some pretty high probability, and you feel probabilities about, well, if you weren't in a simulation, what's the probability that you would have a job of that significance, and and you field the prior probabilities, you plug it into Bayes' rule with the students, and they
Hmm.
see it coming. They see it coming well in advance, and they realize that according to the own probabilities that you elicited from them, if they were to wake up in the White House, they wake up in bed and they stretch out and they look around one day and they're president of the United States,
Yep.
according to the probabilities that they've just fed me, and we're doing this on the whiteboard, so they're learning the math. We're just doing Bayes' rule over and over again, so they get the intuitions. If they stretch out and you wake up in the Oval Office, or not the Oval Office, you don't wake up in the office, right? In your
The
bedroom, in the
Lincoln
Lincoln
bedroom.
bedroom,
How's that?
in the Lincoln bedroom. Maybe you were working hard the night before.
Right.
The chance that you are some sort of like a main character in a simulation, or chosen by God or something like that, according to the probabilities that you will have already fielded from these young people, it rounds to 100%. I mean, there's the possibility that you're not in a simulation, that this just happened randomly, that you just lucked out. It's basically zero.
Right.
Now, here's the point. Here's the point. I don't present this as some sort of a knockdown argument
Okay.
about what you should believe it's Taylor Swift, if you're Taylor
Hmm.
Swift or Donald Trump or something like that. The idea is, in the course of running through the formula, you're learning about Bayes' rule. There's also this other interesting thing. that you can think about with sort of a Cartesian, it's sort of a Cartesian idea, this idea of, well, what is it, a simulation or is it real, or what can we really believe? And it opens the mind to that sort of a thing. You can think about it, you can talk about it for a little while. It's humorous. So there's a certain intellectual play that goes on. And it's
Sure.
a way of presenting an interesting and deep philosophical idea to the students in a way that you present it, you hit it, you have a few laughs about it, you've learned Bayes' rule,
Okay.
and move on to the next class.
All right.
That's kind of how I think about presenting it. And
Okay.
if you want to talk more, if they want to talk more, if you want to have a deeper conversation about how do I know anything is real, we're there to have that conversation,
Uh-huh.
you know.
Okay. So talk to me. Why would someone give up their summer to enroll in this?
Well, first of all, it's going to be more fun.
Hmm.
It's going to be more fun than any other summer school. You're not dragging you through boring lectures and the writing and the. It's not just school. It's sitting around and having a beer, minus the beer, because
Minus
everybody's underage,
not alcoholic beer, if that. All
with
right.
really, really smart people. These are students, the philosophy graduate students that I've picked from top departments. We have a guy at Princeton, there's one from Harvard, there's a fellow at Purdue who's coming down. These are people who I found because they're like you. They raised their hand on social media, on the internet, and said they've self-identified as just very smart and but also outgoing, charismatic, lovely, smart people. We're going to have conversations with those people over and over again. So if you're a parent and you're thinking, how do I help my child boost their verbal ability, their intelligence, their ability to hold a conversation and be smart and seem smart, we are exposing you to the smartest young people who are great at making arguments, great at making conversation, and your child is just going to be doing that over and over and over again all day long for 2 weeks. And if they don't come out smarter in the end, well, I don't then there's no hope. This is the
So
only
so
education.
are you
They
going
give
for
up
a general
education.
population, or are you going for the philosophically inclined high schooler, which I'm
No,
sure the latter exists?
this is for the philosophically inclined. It is, and I have to say, and it's also for people who can afford the program. I mean, it's an expensive program. This is the
Got it.
first year
Mhm.
that we're doing this, and it's a very small ratio, 5 to 1. You know, basically the way that a session is going to work is you're going to have 10 students. You're going to have two young philosophers, in most cases, one of our graduate students, and then maybe like we have some students at Oxford undergrads who are interested in doing this too. And so they'll have another philosophy instructor in there, and you'll run through these conversations. It's a curriculum. You know, we've kind of have an idea what we know what the topics are and kind of where the conversations might go. And so the students that are going to enjoy this are ones that are analytical. They kind of enjoy a little bit of intellectual play. Maybe they're on the debate team. Maybe they're on ethics bowl is kind of a thing
Mhm.
now.
Mhm.
Um, or maybe they just like thinking about religion and philosophy.
All right. Okay.
Yeah.
So, last question before we wrap up here. Why are you doing this?
This is so much more fun than work.
Ah, got it.
I'll tell you what happened. I mean, what happened is the dad came to me and he said, "You should run this program. I mean, you should run a class." This is before. This is there was
Right.
no program in my mind. I
So
did
you
the
founded the
class.
program, or you're
Yeah.
founding the program?
So it's began as just a class that I did for
Okay.
students, and I was 15 years separated from graduate school. I'm
All
a
right.
lawyer, right? So I'm thinking, okay, what I'm gonna go in, and there's gonna be 10 young people, and we're gonna talk about big ideas. I had to think, what are the important things to talk about, and how am I gonna talk about it? I don't want to put them through like a class, like school. How do I make this as lively and humor filled and enjoyable for these people, and with they walk out with the most important boost the best boost they can get with philosophical and conceptual ideas that they're not going to get otherwise. And I did it, and it was so much fun, and it made such a difference for the students, and the parents could see it. So then the
Nice.
two parents came to me afterwards, and they said, "Oh well, we need to expand this. We need to create a real program." And with their support, we founded Reason and Rationality, and I have contacts in the philosophy world. So I knew the head of the department at Princeton and the head of the philosophy department at Harvard. And I went around and talked to people and found great instructors and got some of the universities on board. And
Is this
that's
something
how
that's going to
Reason and
be
Rationality.
accredited by the universities or
Oh,
no?
this will not be accredited, and it's not going to be officially or formally like under the umbrella of the universities. So with Princeton, we will be resident at the theological seminary, which is kind of right there,
All right.
almost part of campus.
Hmm.
But we'll have instructors from Princeton. We'll have the Ben Morris, who is the head of the Princeton philosophy department. He'll participate and he'll guest lecture. And at Swarthmore, we will be on Swarthmore campus, and they were very enthusiastic about this. The head of the philosophy department there at Swarthmore, just everybody I've talked to who's in the philosophy world in academia, they see the value in this, and they also see it hopefully making young people aware of the value of philosophy and driving more interest in philosophy.
Okay. And
Yeah.
to the parent that says philosophy is not going to get my kid anywhere as far as a return on investment point of view, your answer is?
I think that probably that is empirically disprovable, because even if you just look at like the numbers, uh, uh, certainly compared to other areas in the humanities, philosophy does pretty well. I mean, some of that's probably a selection effect because you have very high IQ people going into philosophy to begin with.
Hmm.
But don't take my word for it. You'll find plenty of very accomplished, wealthy, some billionaire philosophy majors.
Sure.
Carl Icahn was Princeton philosophy. No, I think to that parent, reevaluate. I think that philosophy is a great subject for doubling down on both your long-term employability, adaptability, and building your own human capital, and leaving college with something that will be fruitful and give you something to think about and the tools to think about things and have a thriving intellectual life for the rest of your days.
All right. Peter, great conversation. Thanks so much.
All right. Thank you, Charles.
I really hope you enjoyed that. Feel free to visit me, shikalo.com, or feel free to follow me on socials where I share my thoughts more often than weekly. See you next time.